Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The motion prevails and the Sergeant at Arms will bring in the absent members. Members remaining under motions and resolutions, we will continue on the special orders list. The next bill up for consideration is number 105 on general orders. It is House File 653. Senator Ruud.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before us, we have the 2019 Legacy Bill. I think this is a bill that this chamber can be very proud of. It took a lot of work to get here, and I would just like, of course, to say a few thank yous before I go on with the bill. My committee administrator, Matt Alfritz, is really amazing, and so is my CLA, John Cotter, so thank them. I've had great staff. Greg Knopf, Dan Mueller, and Ben Stanley have been immensely helpful to me. I couldn't do this without them. My Vice Chair, Bill Weber. And I also really like to thank my ranking minority member, Chris Eaton. She's been really helpful. Well, I think we've made a good partnership this year. She carried the Clean Water Council bill and did a great job. So thank you, Senator Eaton. And also thank you, Senator Cohen, for his consistent mentorship as the past chair. And all my committee members who really have stood strong with me this year. So the total spending this year is $629 million. The Outdoor Heritage Fund spends $127 million. The Clean Water Fund, $261 million. The Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, $139 million. The Parks and Trails, $101. And all with, you recall that we put in a 5% reserve, and these funds are all spending that money and maintaining the 5% reserve, which has been a very good provision to keep the fund fiscally sound. First off, we have the Outdoor Heritage Fund. We maintain all the recommendations of the Lessart Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council. And with that, my thanks go to Senator Lang, and he would like to have a few words.
Discussion on the bill. Senator Lang, and members, just so everyone's aware, it is House File 653, but we're working off the first engrossment of Senate File 836. Senator Lang.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to congratulate and thank, talk a little bit about legacy and Lessart Sam's Council. So a big thanks to the board, the members Julie Blackburn, David Hartwell, Jamie Swenson, Jane Kingston, Denny McNamara, Barry Tilley, Representative Leon Lilly, Representative Dan Fabian, Ron Schera, Senator Tomasoni, myself, I was on the board. Big thanks to Chair Bob Anderson, who drives down from the Canadian border for every meeting. Executive Director Mark Anderson is in the room with us today. Joe Pavelko, Sandy Smith, and Becky Enfield, and then I'm sure there's many that I'm missing. But just a little roundup. I'll spend just a couple minutes here talking about the legacy funds and my portion of it, the Lessart Sam's Council, that of course is to protect, enhance, restore wetlands, prairies, forest, and fish and game and wildlife habitat. So as many of you know, it's a 25-year process that we're in the midst of right now. Started July 1st, 2009. 33% goes to the Clean Water Fund, 33% to the Outdoor Heritage Fund, 19 3/4 to the Arts, and 14.25 to the Parks and Trails. This year, the Senate File 1019, which is the Lessart Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council recommendations, does a few things. Over 141,000 acres of wildlife habitat has been estimated to restore, enhance, or protect it. So it's expansive. It's very smart. There's 152 miles of shoreline that's going to be restored, enhanced, or protected. $30 million, over $30 million, almost $31 million of federal funds have been leveraged. It's very smart. It has vast reach that we've talked about within the council. The 27 different organizations that are involved in the projects that we do. 2 state agencies, 9 local government units, 15 governmental organizations. The projects, we did 44 projects. We had 46 applications, 2 of which were not funded this year, mainly because of their probably a little bit of confliction with what the amendment says. We talk about our prairies. We have projects like the Prairie Recovery Project or the Northern Tallgrass Prairie Refuge, wild rice corridor habitat restoration. There's forests. We protect forests near Camp Ripley. There's a bunch of strategic forest lands protection. There's also enhanced public land, open landscapes. In the wetlands, we spent almost $21 million shallow lake and wetland protection. The habitats we talk, Metro Big Rivers we funded again this year. There's almost $51 million in that portion. And just a little, roundup of what the legacy amendment means, what we've done over the last 10 years. There's over 300 programs we've been funded. Almost $969 million we put into the outdoor heritage accounts. So with that, I appreciate this, and I hope a green vote on Senator Ruud's bill.
Further discussion on the bill? Senator Ruud.
Thank you, Mr. President. Article 2 is the Clean Water Fund. You all have the spreadsheet in front of you. We spend $50 million more than in fiscal year 18-19. And as you can see, we include $24 million for the soil and water conservation districts. We maintain all of the funding levels for the programs unless the Clean Water Council recommended less funding. Again, we maintain all the fundings for the programs unless the council recommended less funding. The council told us that they wanted the funding emphasis shifting from monitoring to implementation, so we tried to honor that. So we put $20 million more for point source implementation grants and $18 million for CREP. Members, because this body stood strong against an omnibus legacy bill last year, and I appreciate that and I thank you for that, we have $22 million more than we would have had we spent that money last year. That makes the fund very healthy. That gives us the ability to fund the soil and water conservation districts. The Clean Water Council worked very hard with government agencies to put together a good bill, and we tried to honor that. But the governor did not fund the soil and water conservation districts, and neither did the House. So we did. And I think it's very responsible because if you look at the projects that the Clean Water Council and the government agencies want to fund, 57 of them are implemented by the soil and water conservation districts. So if we did not fund them, those projects could not go forward. And I think that would be very irresponsible. Do I wish that we had a better funding source for the conservation districts? I do, but that has not happened. So I think the most responsible thing is to include them in this bill. Article 3 is the Parks and Trails Fund. We fund their recommendations, and it maintains the 40-40 split. 40% to the state parks, 40% to the metro parks and state grants, 20% to the regional parks and trail grants. We also included language to reevaluate the 40-40-20 split. Many of you in this chamber have known that that has been an issue. There has been peace in the valley. People have worked very well with this split, but the language and the agreement expires this year. So the groups got together and asked to have language put in the bill, to put a working group together to really discuss how this is working. Has it worked well? Does it need to be changed? And that report will come in 2020 for the next legislative body to address. Article 4 is the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. The State Arts Board receives $65.693 million. That is the 47%. And I'm very proud of the fact that we maintain that funding. We did a few different things this year. We had almost 10 children's museums come to us for funding. So we decided to create a grant program. We took all of their requests, $1.4 million, and put into a fund. We held them harmless, but we wanted them to go and get a grant in the humanities section to make sure that we are funding new projects and not funding everyday maintenance. It will allow them all to go and apply for those grants. But I will say that I think it's something that we need to look at. The legacy was never meant for operating funds for the children's museums, and so going forward, I think it's something that our committee will look at. I think the children's museums need to find sustainable funding in their communities. We also created a Community Identity and Heritage Grants program for $1.6 million. Those of you who were in the committee on the last day, we had some wonderful, wonderful cultural community bills that we heard. I think we heard 19 of them. And so it was very difficult to choose which ones to fund. So we put together this grants program, and we put the money in there so that they can go forward for their cultural and community projects. We also want to make sure some of these groups are new and they're starting up new cultural programs, and we wanted to make sure that they are fiscally able to administer the grants. And so by going through the humanities, if they're not ready for a grant, they will get some help to make sure that they have the fiscal policies in place to administer the money that they get. And we think that this is a really good program going forward. So groups will be able to, if they fit into the historical grant program, they can go there, or the arts, and now we have the cultural programs. So we think that that is a more well-balanced approach in this bill. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Discussion on House File 653. Senator Eaton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'd like to thank Senator Ruud for her work on this bill and for including me in large parts of it. I support it. I believe that we made some difficult decisions. I know that there's some people who aren't happy that we funded the soil and water conservation districts out of it, but it needs to be funded, and I think it was crucial that it got done. So I will be supporting this bill, and I encourage a green vote.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Ruud, for putting together such a great bill. I did have a question, though, if Senator Ruud would yield.
Senator Ruud will yield. Senator Pappas.
Thank you. Senator Ruud, you mentioned the community identity and heritage grants, and we had kind of a conversation about that when you told me you'd kind of put all the money together that people had asked and gave it to the Humanities Center. And I do have concerns, though, that it's not enough money. I was surprised it was only $1.6 million, since you said there was 19 groups that would be competing at minimum that came to the legislature. And it seems to me like any one of them could, that would be enough to cover maybe 2 or 3 of them. So I don't know. I'd like to hear your response, and then I'd also like to encourage you in conference committee to see if you could put more money into that pot. Thank you.
Senator Ruud.
Mr. President and Senator Pappas, you are correct. It doesn't fund them all, and we would love to fund them all, but I think this is a good start. And if this works, if this program works in funding these cultural you were there. There were so many wonderful projects. So if it works in this bill, then the next bill we can certainly make sure that pot is a little bigger, because there were so many wonderful projects, and we would like to fund them all. But this is a way that we can really fund the ones that are ready. And if they're not ready, maybe we can give them help to get them in the fiscal shape that they need to be in to get money for the next round.
Senator Herr.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second on Senator Pappas what she's just said. And I know that there will be, fiscal agent fee when the appropriate dollars to these cultural community. So I would like to encourage Senator Ruud. She worked very hard on this to also increase the funding as they go to conference. You know, being that there will be fiscal fee charged to manage these cultural grants. And so if there's any agency that are new and need some help, there will be resources there ready within the Humanities Center to support that base. But if you want to break down, you know, I want to also take this opportunity to inform our Senate chamber here that the cultural community are about 10% of population in our state, or even more. If you want to increase to the minority population, there are 25%, but the new American cultural community are 10%, and if we want to break down to our fair share, we have to be at that level. And I know that even though we have a lot, you know, certain percent, you still lack of agency or cultural community out there that come and submit their requests through us. So, you know, I just want to put that into perspective that the cultural community have not asked enough, and we have not given enough to support their needs in the arts and cultural grants. And I would hope that Senator Ruud and members in the conference committee will put this into consideration. Thank you.
Further discussion on House File 653, Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me add my voice to those expressing gratitude to Senator Ruud for putting together a good bill. I intend to support it today. But also, and thank you, Senator Ruud, for touching on the challenges you had in the Clean Water Council area. I read the Clean Water Council letter, and I would tend to agree with the assessment that funding the soil and water conservation districts out of this particular pot is problematic, and I appreciate your articulation of a desire to look to solving this problem in the future. It is, I think, most appropriately funded out of the general fund and not through reducing the projects in the Clean Water Council, in the Clean Water funds, and appropriating the dollars for, and/or eliminating some of those projects and appropriating the dollars for this purpose. Nevertheless, I understood the dilemma that you had and the effort to get that important work going at the soil and water conservation districts, and of course we rely on them to carry out a lot of the projects that are called for in the Clean Water Fund. I especially want to say thank you for retaining the 40-40-20 distribution between the DNR parks and the Metro regional parks and the Greater Minnesota regional parks. I think that's very important to continue faith with that agreement going forward, as well as the 47% distribution from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund to the state arts boards. I second what Senator Pappas and Senator Herr articulated on how we do the competitive grant making and the amounts. However, I think that was a good solution. The general idea is a good one, and I appreciate their creativity there, as well as making the grants to the children's museums around the state. So thank you, Senator Ruud, and look forward to watching your work along with others in the conference committee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the bill, Senator Cohn.
Mr. President, members, just a quick comment. Appreciate what Senator Ruud has done in keeping faith with what the promises were in 2008 to the voters of Minnesota. This is not simply an appropriations bill as we have normally in the finance process. This is a very unusual appropriations bill in that it's based upon the vote of the people, I believe 62 or 63% in 2008. And so maintaining the faith with the promises that were made, to maintain the integrity of the Lessard-Sams Commission recommendations, to maintain the promises relative to the State Arts Board, to maintain the promises relative to what is in front of us relative to clean water. It's an unusual bill in that regard, and Senator Ruud has maintained, again, the integrity of what was promised in a very unusual vote in 2008.
Further discussion on the bill? Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will give House File 653 its third reading.
House File number 653, a bill for an act relating to state government appropriating money from outdoor heritage.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Ruud.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. This body should be proud of this bill. Senator Herr and Senator Pappas, I hear your voices. I think if this works, I think we can do a better job. You know, the legacy is 10 years old, and we are growing as a state, and we are growing in our diversity. And so I look for you to help me do a better job in this. And if we can put some more funds in there, I think that would be really amazing. I have pledged to work. I have met with the Clean Water Council and have pledged to work with them on the numbers, and we are meeting with the governor. And if they need to have the numbers moved in some of their projects, we are committed to do that. If we have missed somewhere and they need a project to be funded better, we are committed to doing that. So I thank you, members, for all your work and support, and I would ask you for a green vote today. Thank you.
Final discussion on the bill, Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I just want to thank Senator Ruud for following the intent of this bill. It's when we color outside the lines, either right or left, that sometimes things don't go very well. That's the broader message that I'm trying to talk about as we go to the end of session, that if we focus on the fundamentals, what we really need to get done, we will get done. And this is a perfect example of that. And Senator Ruud, I think a job well done.
Members, we are on final passage of House File 653. See no further discussion. The Secretary will take the roll. All senators having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 63 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill up for consideration is number 61 on general orders, Senate File 1100, Senator Goggin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I'm really happy to be able to present this bill today. Senate File 1100, what it deals with is back in the 90s, the state passed a series of laws, including the one we are here about today. It's Minnesota Statute 626.93. And basically what that did is it said that the 9 tribal communities in our state had to have cooperation agreements with our local county sheriffs. And you know, since then, our tribal communities have really evolved, and in the case of my Prairie Island Indian community in my district, they've went above and beyond to make sure that the people that live on their reservation and the folks that come visit their reservation have the safest environment within to interact with each other and to enjoy what the reservation has to offer. And so they put together an incredible police force similar to what you would see in any of your cities. And so what this bill does is It allows the city to not, or the Prairie Island Indian community to not have to have a mandatory cooperation agreement. It would be optional, and it would just help the reservation police force to be able to enforce the laws. As it sits right now, if they don't have a cooperation agreement, they cannot even pull anybody over for speeding on their tribal property or tribal reservation. And you know, we want to make sure that they have those opportunities to enforce the laws of the state. So I'm just going to go over a couple of things here about what the bill does. This does not limit or reduce the jurisdiction of any other state agency. It does not extend or alter the tribe's jurisdiction or that of its police officers. It does not reduce the amount of oversight for tribal police officers that is not in the agreement currently, and does direct anything criminal proceedings to tribal court. All state law violations are currently submitted to the county attorney, who has a prosecutorial authority. And that's where we're at here, folks, is you know, this is just an optional agreement, hopefully going forward, rather than mandatory. And I can tell you that our Prairie Island Indian community are fantastic members of the community in the Red Wing Welch area, and they care about the people that live on their reservation and that come visit their facilities and enjoy what they have to offer. And with that, folks, I just want to also say lastly that every officer is post-board certified, just as any other police officer in the state is. And so they've done their homework. They have a really great organization together there, and they really want to make sure that they can have the safest environment for people on their reservation. With that, Mr. President, I stand for any questions.
Discussion on Senate File 1100. Senator Latz.
Mr. President, I rise in support of this bill. It is, at its fundamental essence, it's about a recognition of the ability of a sovereign entity to exercise the basic powers of sovereignty. It recognizes that they are sovereign, and also that they have the capacity and the ability and the power and authority to exercise the police power within their boundaries. In this particular case, the tribe does have all of those, and we ought to recognize that and respect that. I urge members to support the bill.
Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the Secretary will give Senate File 1100 its third reading.
Senate File number 1100, a bill for an act relating to public safety.
Third reading. Members, any final discussion on the bill? Senator Goggin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Latz, and I appreciate all the opportunity here today, and so please vote green.
Members, we are on final passage of Senate File 1100. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. All senators having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 58 ayes and 7 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill up for consideration is number 102 on general orders, Senate File 998. Senator Carrie Ruud.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm happy to present Senate File 998. What 998 is it's for cities or for consultant fees that contractors and or developers incur as a part of doing business in a community. And what this does is this process allows for a vendor, a contractor or a vendor to seek a non-binding written estimate prior to submitting a formal application for a particular project. It does not change the formal application process. Mr. President, we worked all session to reach peace in the valley. We don't have any opposition. And what this does is just allows for a more streamlined process for our vendors doing business. Those fees can vary dramatically, and what they're trying to do is create a process in which they can obtain the costs up front prior to committing to a project. And with that, Mr. President, I stand for questions.
Further discussion to Senate File 998. Seeing no discussion, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File number 998, a bill for an act relating to cities.
Third reading. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the Secretary will take the roll on the bill. All senators having voted who desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 8 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Next item on special orders is number 104 on general orders, Senate File 973, Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senate File 973 is a proposal to establish an advisory council on rare diseases at the University of Minnesota. 1 in 10 Americans have a rare disease, resulting in about 30 million people having a serious, lifelong condition, and more than half of those with a rare disease are children. Historically, the rare disease community has been an underrepresented population in healthcare, with only 5% of the about 7,000 rare diseases having any kind of treatment. Research is often underfunded, and the unique needs of the community and the families are not well understood. Members, we have a chance to change that right here in the state of Minnesota with the Chloe Barnes Rare Disease Advisory Council. The goal of creating this advisory council on rare diseases is to gather experts from across medical fields and have them come together and share their knowledge, experience, and expertise to provide advice on research, diagnosis, treatments, and ultimately cures related to rare diseases. Members, this is a grassroots effort led by families right here in Minnesota, including the Quimby family from Winona, who lost their son Gavin as a result of a rare disease, and the Barnes family, who lost their daughter Chloe as a result of the rare diseases. And members, there are many, many more families that are experiencing these rare diseases in the state of Minnesota. And today, we can make a difference and do something about it. I ask you to join me in voting yes on the Chloe Barnes Rare Disease Advisory Council.
Discussion to Senate File 973, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I rise to support Senator Miller's Senate File 973 on the Rare Disease Council. Many diseases were rare at one time, and sometimes they don't even know they're rare or how rare till they start networking and talking to each other, which has led to many cures and much research and much as well. And Senator Miller clarified that and how important that is. But not only that, when it's rare, you feel so lonely, you feel so alone. And it's so challenging as they discover the disease, deal with it, and work with it. But to be able to have a rare disease council where the commonness that they can share with each other is of great encouragement and great value to these parents and to their children. So I just want to say thank you to Senator Miller and to all of these families who have worked together to bring this to the attention and to be able to support each other, work together, and also to seek research for cures. But there's great value to them even beyond the cures that may be in the future, great value to them through this council in getting to know each other and sharing that and working together. So thank you, Senator Miller, and I ask for a yes vote on Senate File 973, the Rare Disease Council. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion of the bill, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A4 amendment.
Senator Rosen offers the A4 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Rosen moves to amend Senate File number 973 as follows, page 4, line 4. This is the A4 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Miller. I am full support of the Rare Disease Council, but however, I would like to have you consider that this appropriation goes till 2024. After that, we reset the button, take a look if the appropriation still needs to continue and if the council needs to continue, and I think that's fair for all money that is appropriated going forward.
Discussion to the A4 amendment, Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Rosen. I have spoken to the stakeholders, and everyone is in agreement that we would fund the advisory council for the next 4 years, and after that, we would take a look at it. The amendment that Senator Rosen is offering simply sunsets the funding, but does not sunset the actual advisory council, so they can continue to operate. And members, the hope is that this will garner enough support not only throughout the state of Minnesota, but throughout the entire country, and perhaps there might be some research grants or other grants available to fund the advisory council, but we certainly want to get them up and going and help them be successful. And so if this amendment is adopted, which I do support, it would fund them for the next 4 years, and then they would come back to the legislature after that if they need additional funding. And Mr. President, members, I should also mention that this proposal is also traveling in the Higher Education Conference Committee as well as the Health and Human Services Conference Committee. The University of Minnesota has expressed some concerns about having this part of the higher education budget. It is my hope and my goal that we can pass this separately through this chamber today and ultimately through the House chamber and get it to the governor's desk as a standalone bill. The funding in the higher education bill is right now at $100,000. The bill in front of us is $50,000. The total needed is $150,000 per year, which this would accomplish if we pass this today. The reason why the bill in front of us is not for $150,000 is because we would have to book that money twice since it is traveling in the conference committee. So with that, I stand for any additional questions.
Discussion to the A4 amendment. Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the A4 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Further discussion to the bill on Senate File 973, Senator Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I also would like to thank Senator Miller for bringing this bill forward. And I would like to piggyback on top of Senator Kiffmeyer's comments. Yesterday in the Conference Committee on Health and Human Services, we talked about ectodermal dysplasia as well as the PANDAS and PANS syndromes. And we're going to see this more and more as medicine advances. It's real common for medical devices and for new surgical procedures to get the kind of press, or if you will, coverage that moves those forward. But as Senator Kiffmeyer said, oftentimes when you have a rare medical disease, you feel very alone. And I think what this council will also be able to do is help coalesce thought leaders as we address things like, is this being covered by insurance? Is an insurance plan able to say, no, this $100,000 drug, which could be potentially curative, isn't covered because it's not part of your plan? So I could see where this Rare Disease Council would have impact on even helping insurance companies get a heads up that they need to start addressing this. So I think this bill is extremely timely and will probably have more impact than we might originally have thought. Thank you.
Further discussion to Senate File 973. The Secretary will give Senate File 973 its third reading.
Senate File number 973, a bill for an act relating to health.
Third reading. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the Secretary will take the roll. All senators having voted who desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 65 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Remaining under special orders, number 78 on general orders, House File 148, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. House File 148 and Senate File 1074 is before you. And members, this deals with a community EMT, which has been around for quite a while, actually, and it's basically adding the language to the basic life support and ambulance services to the community EMT statute. So currently, medical response units can have a community EMT on their services, and this would allow the basic life support ambulance services to also utilize the community emergency services at the request of a rural ambulance service to enhance basic life support ambulance teams. So with that, Mr. President, I have the A1 amendment.
Senator Rosen offers the A1 amendment to House File 148. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Rosen moves to amend House File number 148 as follows. Page 2 after line 30, insert. This is the A1 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this would just allow that adds community paramedics to the list of providers who can utilize telehealth services. The community paramedic members, if you remember, this has been around for quite a while, uses a team-based approach with oversight by their medical director.
Any discussion on the A1 amendment? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of adopting the A1 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Further discussion of the bill as amended, Senator Rosen.
Thank you for that, Mr. President, members, because telehealth is very important to the continuation of these programs that have been so vital throughout the entire state. But when the community EMT legislation was initially passed, it was a complete oversight not to include the basic life support ambulance, and that is something we are just cleaning up in this bill and the amendment to make sure that this program runs efficiently and is able to continue to provide services. We've seen great results from this program, and initially it was developed for Greater Minnesota, but we have seen cost savings in the major metro hospitals by using these various programs. So with that, members, I will answer your questions and ask for your support. Thank you.
Further discussion to House File 148. The Secretary will give House File 148 its third reading.
House File number 148, a bill for an act relating to health.
Third reading. Any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the Secretary will take the roll. All senators having voted who desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 65 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Next item on special orders is number 90 on general orders, Senate File 2313, Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I have Senate File 2313 today, which is the Department of Commerce's Federal Conformity Bill. We have 5 areas of conformity within this bill to help maintain strong state-based regulation. The National Association of Insurance Commissioners, the NAIC, acts as a facilitator to draft model acts to ensure consistency in the marketplace. The NAIC model acts included in this bill are an accreditation standards beginning January 1st, 2020. Without action by the legislature in 2019, Minnesota could be at risk of losing accreditation. Members, in Article 1, It is the annual financial reporting model regulation. The revisions to this model act require all large insurers to have internal audit capabilities and have direct access for the internal audit committee to the board of directors, independent from the insurance company management. This model act will enhance the Department of Commerce's ability to monitor insurance solvency. Article 2 is the Holding Company Model Act. The Model Act articulates which entity would serve as a lead regulator for an insurance company that operates in at least 3 countries. These insurance companies are referred to as internationally active insurance groups. Minnesota is home to one insurance company, Allianz, that meets this criteria. Article 3 is the risk-based capital trend test for health organizations. This model act assists in identifying troubled health insurance companies. The risk-based capital trend test is currently in statute for all insurance types except health insurance. Article 4 is a Corporate Governance Annual Disclosure Act. This model act provides the Department of Commerce additional information on corporate governance practices on a yearly basis. Currently, the department receives corporate governance information every 3 to 5 years based on the insurance examination schedule. This model act applies to all insurance companies in Minnesota. And lastly, Article 5 addresses Medicare supplemental insurance. The bill language ensures Medicare supplement plans sold in Minnesota conform to federal requirements. Beginning January 1st, 2020, federal requirements no longer allow Medicare supplement plans to cover Part B deductibles. This change applies to new enrollees only. Current Medicare enrollees are not affected. And members, that deductible amounts to $185 a year. Currently, the plans covered your deductible. Those that were buying Medicare supplements going forward, that'll be the responsible, or the enrollee will be responsible for that. Minnesota is one of 3 waiver states, and we need to pass this model act or we would lose our regulatory authority over the Medigap plans, and that's referring to Article 5. With that, Mr. President, I would like to offer the A3 amendment.
Senator Utke offers the A3 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Utke moves to amend Senate File Number 2313 as follows, page 7, line 10. This is the A3 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, it's a short amendment. It's more a little housekeeping. You'll notice the first 2 lines just fall under the definition segment, and it's just the wording. In each case, they were in the bold print, but they weren't put back into the sentence, so it's just a technical amendment. And then the last one is deleting one sentence that's kind of redundant, so it's just a quick little amendment.
Discussion on the A3 amendment. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Further discussion on the bill. Seeing none, the Secretary will give Senate File 2313 its third reading.
Senate File Number 2313, a bill for an act relating to insurance.
Third reading. Members, any final discussion on the bill? We are on final passage of Senate File 2313 as amended. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. All senators having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 65 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and it's titled agreed to. Members remaining under motions and resolutions will move to the 13th order of business, announcements of Senate interest. Without objection, the following senators will be excused from today's session. Senators Eaton, Latz, and Sparks from 10:30 a.m. to 10:35 a.m. Senator Hoffman from 12:45 p.m. to the end of session, and Senator Abler all day. Members, any announcements? Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Environmental Resource Finance Conference Committee will resume at 2 o'clock.
Members, any further announcements? Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until Thursday, May 9th at 10 a.m.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The Senate is adjourned.